A father held his daughter's tiny hand as strangers watched them leave the first-class cabin. The little girl didn't cry. She simply looked back at the window seat she'd dreamed about for months and whispered, "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Nobody answered. Not the flight attendants. Not the passengers. Not the businessman who had demanded they be removed. The cabin door was minutes away from closing. Then, the cockpit door opened, and the captain himself walked into the cabin. What happened next delayed Flight 782 by 11 minutes, changed an airline policy, and became one of the most talked-about acts of leadership that airport employees would remember for years. Introduction. Date: October 14. A cool autumn morning. Visibility stretched for nearly 20 miles beneath clear blue skies. Only light crosswinds brushed the runway. Perfect weather for flying. Nothing suggested this ordinary domestic flight would soon become unforgettable. Flight information. Flight Pacific National Airlines Flight 782. Aircraft: Boeing 730-7900ER. Registration: N827PN. Route: Chicago O'Hare to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Flight time: 4 hours and 12 minutes. Passengers: Crew: 6. 2 pilots. 4 flight attendants. Everything appeared routine. Cockpit crew: Captain Daniel Mercer. Age 56. More than 18,000 flight hours. Former Air Force transport pilot. Known throughout the company for remaining calm under pressure. He had trained dozens of younger captains. People said there was almost nothing he hadn't seen. First Officer Lisa Chen. Age 32. Precise. Methodical. Exceptionally respected. She was preparing the cockpit for departure while Captain Mercer completed the final paperwork. Neither pilot knew what was unfolding behind the cockpit door. Cabin crew. Leading the cabin: Senior Flight Attendant Maria Gonzalez. 23 years of experience. She had handled medical emergencies, diversions, engine failures, even an evacuation. She believed passengers deserved dignity before anything else. That belief would soon be tested. Scene 1: The Special TICKTS. Most passengers boarded without incident. Business travelers opened laptops before even sitting down. Families searched for overhead bin space. Children pressed faces against the windows. Among them walked 38-year-old Michael Carter. His left hand pulled a worn blue suitcase. His right held 8-year-old Emma's hand. Emma wore a bright yellow sweater. She carried a stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm. Months earlier, Michael had quietly saved money from overtime shifts as a city bus mechanic. No vacations. No restaurant dinners. No unnecessary purchases. Every extra dollar went into one surprise: 2 genuine first-class tickets. Not because he wanted luxury. Because Emma had spent almost a year recovering from major heart surgery. The doctors finally cleared her to travel. Michael wanted her very first flight after recovery to be unforgettable. When Emma saw the large leather seats, her eyes sparkled. "Daddy, are these really ours?" Michael smiled. "They sure are." She hugged him tightly. For the first time in months, she looked completely healthy, completely happy. Nearby passengers smiled. Several congratulated the little girl. Everything seemed perfect, but only for a moment. Pilot dialogue. First Officer Chen. Cockpit preparation complete. Captain Mercer. Good, let's be ready for an on-time departure. ATC dialogue. Ground control. Flight 782, expect departure runway 28 center. Captain Mercer. Roger 28 center. Passenger reactions. Emma couldn't stop smiling. Michael took photographs. The surrounding passengers appeared relaxed. Nobody realized someone had already begun complaining. Technical explanation. During boarding, the flight deck is focused on aircraft preparation, while cabin crew handle seating issues independently. Pilots are normally informed only if a problem affects safety or departure timing. The businessman stood in the aisle without moving. Expensively tailored suit. Luxury watch. Leather briefcase resting against his leg. He glanced at Michael, then at Emma. Finally, he looked toward senior flight attendant Maria Gonzalez. His voice was calm. Too calm. Excuse me. I believe these passengers are sitting in the wrong seats. Maria smiled professionally. I'll check, sir. She scanned Michael's boarding passes. Seat 2A. Seat 2B. Both confirmed. She smiled again. Everything is correct, sir. The businessman didn't move. Instead, his expression hardened. No. I fly this route every week. Those seats are always reserved for our executive clients. Several nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maria kept her composure. These tickets were purchased legitimately. The seats belonged to Mr. Carter and his daughter. For a brief second, it looked as though the conversation was over. But then, the man leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough that only those nearby could hear. There has to be some mistake. They don't exactly look like first-class passengers. The words hit the cabin like sudden turbulence. Michael froze. Emma looked up at her father. She didn't fully understand, but she knew someone was talking about them. Michael forced a polite smile. Our boarding passes are valid. We'd just like to sit down. Instead of stepping aside, the businessman folded his arms. I'm not sitting until this is fixed. The aisle began to back up. Passengers behind him couldn't reach their rows. Some sighed in frustration. Others quietly watched, sensing the situation was becoming something much bigger than a seating dispute. Pilot dialogue. First Officer Chen. Boarding slowing down. Cabin hasn't closed yet. Captain Mercer. Probably overhead bin congestion. Let me know if we're more than 5 minutes behind. ATC dialogue. Ground control. Pacific National 782. Advise when ready for pushback. Captain Mercer. Ground 782. We're still boarding. We'll advise. Passenger reactions. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband. They have the right seats. Another passenger quietly nodded. Emma hugged her stuffed rabbit a little tighter. Michael remained calm, avoiding an argument for his daughter's sake. But tension spread through the first-class cabin. Technical explanation. Boarding delays are common and are usually caused by baggage, seating disputes, or passenger issues. Flight attendants are trained to verify boarding passes, resolve conflicts professionally, and prevent situations from escalating. The cockpit crew generally remains focused on aircraft preparation unless a delay threatens the flight schedule or creates a safety concern. Narration. Maria spoke into her interphone. Gate supervisor requested in first class. Within moments, Gate supervisor Karen Mitchell stepped onto the aircraft. She reviewed the boarding passes herself. Again, everything matched. Seat 2A. Seat 2B. Paid in full. No upgrade. No error. She looked at the businessman. "Sir, these passengers are seated correctly." Instead of accepting the answer, he raised his voice. "So you're telling me this airline values loyalty less than this?" The sentence hung in the air. No one spoke. Several passengers lowered their eyes. Emma looked at her father and whispered, "Daddy, did I break a rule?" Michael swallowed hard before answering, "No, sweetheart. You did everything right." The words were gentle, but they broke the silence inside the cabin. Several passengers quietly shook their heads. One man reached for his phone, recording discreetly. None of them realized the incident was about to reach the cockpit. Suspense ending. Just as the cabin door was about to close, the interphone rang inside the flight deck. Senior Flight Attendant Maria's voice was unusually serious. "Captain, we have a situation in first class." Captain Mercer looked up from his checklist. "What kind of situation?" Maria paused for one long second, then answered, "I think you need to see this yourself." The captain unfastened his shoulder harness and reached for the cockpit door. Cockpit door opened. Passengers turned in surprise as Captain Daniel Mercer stepped calmly into the first-class cabin. Airline captains almost never leave the flight deck during boarding unless something truly unusual has happened. His presence immediately silenced the cabin. He looked first at Senior Flight Attendant Maria Gonzalez, then at Gate Supervisor Karen Mitchell. Finally, he looked at Michael and 8-year-old Emma. Emma was holding her stuffed rabbit tightly, trying not to cry. Captain Mercer knelt so he was at eye level with her. "What's your name?" She answered softly, "Emma." He smiled. "Emma, did you know something?" She shook her head. "No." He continued gently, "Today, you're my special passenger." The little girl looked confused. "So, I didn't do anything wrong?" The captain smiled warmly. "Not even a little." He stood and faced the cabin. Then he addressed everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have personally reviewed the situation. Mr. Carter and his daughter purchased these seats legally. They are exactly where they belong. This flight operates under one rule. We treat every passenger with dignity and respect. It doesn't matter how often someone flies. It doesn't matter what they wear. It doesn't matter what job they have. If you've purchased your seat, it is yours. If anyone has a problem with that, they are welcome to discuss it with customer service after this flight. But this discussion is over." The first-class cabin fell completely silent. Then, someone began clapping. Another passenger joined. Within seconds, applause spread throughout the aircraft. Even passengers seated farther back wondered what had happened. The businessman lowered his head. Without another word, he gathered his belongings. He quietly accepted another available seat farther back in the aircraft. There were no arguments, no shouting, only silence. Captain Mercer looked back at Emma. "I think there's one more thing." He reached into his flight bag and handed her a small set of children's captain wings. "I've carried these for years. They belong to someone who's very brave." Emma smiled for the first time since the incident. She carefully pinned the wings onto her sweater. The entire cabin smiled with her. Minutes later, the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Flight 782 departed only 11 minutes behind schedule. The rest of the journey was calm. Captain Mercer invited Emma and her father to visit the cockpit after landing, where she sat in the captain's seat, asked questions about flying, and proudly took photos with the crew. Months later, Pacific National Airlines completed an internal review of the boarding incident. The investigation concluded that the cabin crew had correctly followed company policy by verifying the boarding passes and attempting to resolve the dispute professionally. It also praised Captain Mercer's leadership, noting that his calm intervention helped de-escalate the situation without compromising safety or delaying the flight significantly. The airline introduced additional customer service training, focused on handling public seating disputes with greater sensitivity and respect. For Michael, the trip became more than a vacation. It became proof that kindness can outweigh prejudice. Years later, Emma still kept the small captain's wings in a wooden box beside photographs from that flight. Whenever someone asked why they meant so much to her, she would smile and say, "That was the day a pilot reminded everyone that respect doesn't come with a ticket class." Because the true measure of first class isn't found in wider seats, better meals, or priority boarding. It's found in the character of the people on board. And on Flight 782, one captain reminded an entire cabin that leadership begins with doing the right thing, even when it's the harder choice. If this story moved you, remember this. Kindness costs nothing. Respect belongs to everyone. And sometimes, the smallest act of courage changes a life forever. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next aviation story.